Her Millionaire was about to lose $1 million deal, until a poor boy saved everything. Without a translator and with the company on the verge of bankruptcy, he had already been humiliated through 3 failed meetings. That's when a homeless boy knocked on the window, spoke another language, and turned the game around. But what began as a gesture of gratitude turned into a scandal that nearly destroyed both their lives. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue, I promise. This will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Richard Morgan stared at the computer screen with tired eyes. The reflection of the monitor illuminated his tense face, highlighting the new wrinkles that had appeared in recent weeks. 3 failed meetings, 3 lost opportunities. The international contract that would save Morgan Textiles had practically slipped through his fingers. The sudden absence of Maurice, his trusted interpreter, had caused a series of misunderstandings with the Chinese investors. The language barrier had become an insurmountable abyss. Richard had tried other interpreters, but none had managed to establish the necessary bridge for mutual understanding. The last email received from the investors was clear. We regret to inform you that due to recent communication difficulties, we are reconsidering our partnership. Those words were like daggers in his chest. 15 years building the company, 3 generations of the Morgan family dedicated to the textile sector, all about to collapse. Rain lashed against the windows of the 20th floor office. Richard ran his hands through his graying hair, wondering where he had gone wrong. Maybe he should have learned Mandarin. Maybe he should have hired more than one interpreter. Maybe he should have. His musings were interrupted by a strange sound. At first he thought it was just the storm, but the noise persisted, rhythmic. Someone was knocking on his office window. On the 20th floor. Richard jumped up in surprise. He pulled back the blinds and came face to face with a soaking wet boy, clinging to the metal structure of the window. The boy looked no more than 9 years old, with a thin face and frightened but determined eyes. Richard immediately opened the window. "For God's sake, child! What are you doing there? You'll fall!" The boy jumped in with the agility of a cat. "Sorry, sir, there was no other way to talk to you." Richard was astonished. "How did you get up here?" "By the fire escape. I'm light, I can squeeze through the gaps. But don't worry, I'm not going to steal anything. I came to help." "Help? How?" The boy shivered slightly, his soaked clothes forming a small puddle on the imported carpet. "My name is Gabriel. I heard you talking in the elevator about the Chinese. I understand what they're saying." Richard raised his eyebrows, incredulous. "You speak Mandarin? How?" "I lived in a Chinese restaurant for 2 years. I slept in the pantry. They gave me food and I washed dishes. I learned by listening." The businessman observed the boy carefully. Disheveled hair, worn clothes, but there was something in his gaze, a lively, alert intelligence. "And how do you know I might need help?" "The security guards talk about everything. I heard that your interpreter disappeared and that the company is almost bankrupt, and also—" Gabriel hesitated, biting his lower lip. "Also what?" "I also heard that the Chinese are looking to close a deal with Pratt Textiles. They have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow." Richard felt his blood run cold. Pratt Textiles was his main competitor. If they closed the contract, it would all be over. "How do you know this?" "The son of Pratt's owner hangs out in the same park I do. He thinks he's important, tells everything to try to impress the girls." Richard looked at the window, the rain, then at the soaked boy. He was desperate, but not desperate enough to trust a street child. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but this is grown-up business." Gabriel shrugged. "Okay, I just thought I could help." They were talking about some problem with the technical specifications of the fabrics, something about weight and resistance. Richard froze. This information was not public knowledge. How could that boy know? "What else did you hear?" "That you didn't understand their specifications? That they need a fabric with specific resistance for use in hospital uniforms? That your competitors have already understood what they want?" The businessman sat down slowly. That made sense. At the last meeting, there was a long technical discussion that his temporary interpreter didn't seem to understand completely. "And you think you can help me solve this?" Gabriel smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "I can try, I just need you to trust me." Richard checked his watch. It was past 9 at night. He was alone in the office with nothing to lose. "I'm going to call them now." "If you really understand what they're saying, this is your chance to prove it." The boy nodded, approaching the desk as Richard dialed the number. There were a few moments of tense silence until a voice answered on the other end. "Mr. Wang, this is Richard Morgan." "I know it's late, but—" Gabriel made a gesture asking to speak. Richard, hesitant, put the call on speakerphone. What followed surprised Richard. Gabriel began to speak in Mandarin with impressive fluency. His voice, previously timid, gained confidence. There was a moment of confusion when he apparently used an incorrect technical term, but he quickly corrected himself, apologizing humbly. The conversation lasted almost 20 minutes. Richard's eyes followed every expression on the boy's face, every gesture, every pause. When Gabriel finally said goodbye and the call ended, the businessman was speechless. "What did you say to him?" "I explained that there was a problem with our interpreter, but that now we understand exactly what they need. I talked about the technical specifications of the fabric, about the weight and resistance. I mentioned that we could present samples with the exact characteristics they're looking for." "And what did he say?" Gabriel smiled. "They're going to give us one last chance. They scheduled a meeting for tomorrow at 10 o'clock, right here, in your office." Richard couldn't believe it. An hour earlier, he was preparing to declare bankruptcy. Now he had a new opportunity. "How can I thank you, Gabriel?" The boy looked at his own soaked clothes and then at the window, where the rain continued to fall mercilessly. "Could you let me sleep here tonight, just until the rain stops?" Richard felt a tightness in his chest. This child had just saved his company, and all he asked for was temporary shelter. "Of course you can, but we'll do better than that." Richard picked up the phone and called Martha, his secretary. "Martha, I need you to buy clothes for a 9-year-old boy, yes now, and order food from the Italian restaurant. Yes, it's urgent." Gabriel watched, astonished. "You don't need to do this, sir." "Of course I do. You gave me hope when I had none. The least I can do is make sure you're dry, fed, and rested for tomorrow." Gabriel's expression changed. A glimmer of emotion appeared in his eyes, quickly contained. "Are you really going to let me help with the meeting?" Richard put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Gabriel, if you can do tomorrow what you did today, you won't just participate in the meeting. You'll have a permanent place in this company." While they waited for Martha, Richard observed the boy curiously exploring the office, touching objects with reverence, as if he were in a museum. There was something special about that child, something that went far beyond his unusual linguistic ability. "Gabriel, where are your parents?" The boy shrugged, suddenly interested in his own feet. "I don't know. My mom left me at a shelter when I was 5. I ran away after a while." "And you've been living on the streets since then?" "More or less. Sometimes people let me sleep in the back of stores. I worked in some places like the Chinese restaurant, but never for very long." Richard felt a wave of compassion. Behind that intelligence and courage was just a vulnerable and lonely child. Well, that's going to change starting today. The door opened and Martha entered, carrying bags of clothes and food. Her eyes widened when she saw the soaked boy, but Richard made a discreet gesture, indicating he would explain later. "Martha, this is Gabriel, our new consultant. Please take him to get changed and then bring him back for dinner." Gabriel looked at Richard, then at Martha, not believing what was happening. For the first time that night, he really seemed like a child, surprised, emotional, and a little scared by the sudden change in his fortune. As the boy followed Martha, Richard turned to the window. The rain was beginning to diminish, as were the clouds hovering over his future. A strange feeling took hold of him, something between gratitude and purpose. As if, by opening that window, he had allowed the entrance not just of a skilled boy, but of a new chance. A chance not only to save his company, but to do something truly meaningful. That night, as Gabriel slept on the office couch, covered with Richard's coat, the businessman made a silent promise. If this child could really help him save Morgan Textiles, he would forever change that boy's life. What Richard didn't know was that Gabriel had already begun to change his. Morning arrived with clear skies and a timid sun after the previous night's storm. Richard awoke on the smaller office couch where he had spent the night. To ensure Gabriel wouldn't be alone, he observed the boy still asleep, his serene face contrasting with the history of abandonment he carried. At 8 o'clock, the office began to come to life. Employees arrived, surprised to find the company owner sleeping on the couch, and even more surprised to see an unknown boy wearing a dress shirt that looked more like a dress on him. "Richard, can we talk in private?" The voice of Carl Vance, minority partner and longtime friend, sounded tense. In the corner of the meeting room, Carl didn't hide his concern. "Have you lost your mind, bringing a street child to the office, and now you tell me you're going to Let him participate in the meeting with the Chinese. He speaks Mandarin fluently, Carl. He managed to schedule a new meeting when all seemed lost." "And you believe that?" "Richard, this boy probably made up this story to get food and shelter. Have you thought about the legal implications, our reputation?" Richard stood firm. "I'll be present the whole time. If he can't help us as promised, I'll take responsibility." Carl shook his head, disappointed. 15 years working together, and you risk everything because of a charitable impulse. I sincerely hope you know what you're doing." When he returned to the main office, Richard found Gabriel chatting animatedly with Martha. The boy had taken a shower, and the new clothes, even though too big, gave him an almost respectable appearance. "Good. Morning, Gabriel. Did you sleep well?" "Better than ever, sir. I've never slept on such a soft couch." Richard smiled. "The meeting is at 10. We have time for a hearty breakfast." At the ground floor restaurant, Gabriel devoured pancakes as if there was no tomorrow. Between one forkful and another, he asked questions about the company, absorbing every detail with genuine fascination. "Did you start alone?" "No, I inherited the company from my father, who received it from my grandfather. We're a family business." "And will your children inherit it too?" Richard hesitated. "I have only one daughter, Sophie. She's 14 and honestly doesn't show much interest in the business." "And your wife?" "Helen is a psychologist. She has her own practice." Gabriel nodded, thoughtful. "Does she know about me?" "Not yet. I'll talk to her tonight." The boy lowered his eyes. "She'll think I'm a nuisance." "Why do you say that?" "People always do. That's why I don't stay in one place for very long." Richard felt a pang of sadness. "This time will be different, I promise." At 10 o'clock sharp, the Chinese delegation arrived. Richard introduced Gabriel as his special assistant, noting the skeptical looks. Mr. Wang, leader of the delegation, politely greeted the boy in Mandarin, clearly testing him. To everyone's amazement, Gabriel responded naturally, even making a joke that drew smiles from the visitors. The initial barrier was broken. During the meeting, Gabriel not only translated, but actively engaged in the technical discussion. When a disagreement arose about logistics costs, the boy intervened with precise arguments, explaining to both Richard and the Chinese the points of disagreement. At one point, Mr. Wang made a comment in Mandarin only to his colleagues. Gabriel, attentive, responded immediately, citing numbers and specifications. The Chinese exchanged impressed looks. "What did he say?" Richard asked discreetly. "He commented that they might get a better price with Pratt Textiles." I replied, "that our fabrics have international quality certification and that we can guarantee consistent deliveries, something that Pratt hasn't managed in the last 3 contracts." Richard's eyes widened. How did Gabriel know these details? After 2 hours, the contract was signed. The investors showed evident satisfaction and, surprisingly, special interest in the young interpreter. "Where did you find this young talent?" asked Mr. Wang as they said goodbye. "Let's say he found me," Richard replied with a smile. "He has a bright future. If you ever want to send him to study in China, my company would be pleased to sponsor." After the investors left, the office exploded in celebration. The contract had saved the company from imminent bankruptcy and opened doors to new markets. Amid the euphoria, Gabriel remained quiet, observing everything with a mix of joy and discomfort. "Are you okay?" asked Richard. "Yes, I'm just not used to so many people." You were incredible. How did you know all those details about Pratt? Gabriel shrugged. I hear things. People talk a lot when they think no one important is listening. In the afternoon, news of the saving contract was already circulating in business circles. Richard decided it was time to take Gabriel home and talk to Helen. It wouldn't be an easy conversation. In the car, the boy observed the city with curiosity. Do you live far from here? Not very. In the Mountain Gardens complex. Gabriel whistled, impressed. I've passed by there. It has huge guard posts. You know the city well. I know all the good places to sleep, eat and hide. The statement made naturally tugged at Richard's heart again. What kind of life was this for a child? When they arrived home, Sophie was the first to see them. The teenager was by the pool and ran to the door, curious. Who is he, Dad? Sophie, this is Gabriel. He's going to stay with us for a while. The girl looked at Gabriel with interest. Hi, want to swim? I have a pair of shorts that should fit you. Gabriel looked at Richard, unsure. You can go, encouraged the businessman. I need to talk to your mother anyway. Helen was in her home office, reviewing files. The expression on her face when she saw her husband enter already indicated that something was bothering her. What's this story about a child that they're commenting on at the gate? Why didn't you tell me you were bringing someone? Richard explained everything, from the knocking on the window to the saved contract. Helen listened in silence, her face impassive. Let me see if I understand, she finally said. You brought a street boy without any documentation to our home, without checking his background, without talking to social workers, without even consulting me. It all happened very quickly, Helen. He saved our company. That doesn't justify such an irresponsible decision. What if he has family? What if the police are looking for him? Have you thought about the legal implications? He was living on the streets, Helen, sleeping on fire escapes. Helen sighed deeply. Richard, I understand your gratitude, but we can't simply adopt every needy child who crosses our path. I'm not talking about adoption, just helping him temporarily. For how long? A week? A month? A year? What's the plan? The question hung in the air. Richard had no answer. I'll accept him staying until the end of the week, Helen continued. Meanwhile, I'll contact Child Protective Services to find out the proper procedure. Richard knew it was the most he could get at the moment. When they returned to the pool area, they found Sophie teaching Gabriel to float. The boy was laughing, as Richard had never seen him laugh before, like the child he was. At night, after Gabriel was settled in the guest room, Richard received a call from Carl. We have a problem. A journalist from the Economic Journal is investigating the Morgan Textiles miracle. Apparently someone talked about the boy, and she wants to know more. What did you tell her? Nothing yet, but she's known for creating controversies. If she discovers that you're keeping a child without legal authorization, he's not being kept against his will, Carl. You know how the press distorts things. I suggest we formalize the situation as soon as possible. After hanging up, Richard went to check on Gabriel. The boy was sleeping deeply, wrapped in the blankets as if he feared someone would take them away during the night. Beside the bed, he had carefully organized the few new clothes like precious treasures. The next morning, Gabriel woke up early and was found in the kitchen, helping the maid prepare breakfast. Good morning, Mr. Richard. I made coffee I learned at the Chinese restaurant. Helen observed from the door with an analytical expression. Do you cook frequently, Gabriel? Whenever they let me. I like to be useful. Sophie entered, still sleepy. Dad, can I take Gabriel to meet my friends today? I think it's better. Not to, Helen intervened. Gabriel needs to rest and we need to resolve his situation. What situation? Asked Sophie. Bureaucracy, Richard quickly replied. Documents and those things. Gabriel visibly wilted. Are you going to send me back to the shelter? No one mentioned a shelter, Richard assured. We just need to formalize your stay with us. Helen gave her husband a warning look. Don't create expectations that we may not be able to fulfill. During breakfast, the phone rang. It was the reception at the complex warning that a journalist insisted on speaking with Richard. She claimed to have important information about the interpreter boy. "I'm not available," instructed Richard. "Tell her I'm traveling." Gabriel observed everything with attentive eyes. "I'm causing problems, aren't I?" Helen surprised everyone with her response. "No, Gabriel. Adults sometimes complicate simple situations." That afternoon, while Richard and Helen were discussing, in low voices in the office, Gabriel approached Sophie, who was studying in the living room. "Can I help you? I see you're studying English." Sophie smiled. "You know English too?" "A little. I learned from tourists in the park." In minutes, the two were absorbed in translation exercises, laughing at the exaggerated pronunciations Gabriel made to teach Sophie. Helen observed them discreetly, her face revealing her internal conflict. "You're thinking of taking this further, aren't you?" she asked Richard, when they were alone. "And what if I am?" "Richard, we can't just incorporate a child into our family like adopting an abandoned dog. There are procedures, evaluations, psychological preparation. I know that, but I also know how to recognize when something seems right." Helen shook her head. "You've always been impulsive. Have you thought about how Sophie will feel sharing our attention, and how Gabriel will adapt to a world completely different from what he knows?" Before Richard could answer, they heard a noise in the kitchen. They ran there and found Gabriel kneeling, picking up the pieces of a broken plate. Sorry, he repeated in panic. "I just wanted to help wash the dishes. I'm very clumsy. I always ruin everything." Helen approached calmly and touched his shoulder. "It's all right, Gabriel. It's just a plate." "You're not angry?" the boy asked, looking at Richard. "Of course not. At the Chinese restaurant, when I broke something, they got very angry. They wouldn't let me have dinner." Helen and Richard exchanged dismayed looks. The psychologist knelt beside the boy. "Here, no one goes without eating, Gabriel, and we all break things sometimes." The words were simple, but the tone and the gesture of helping him up communicated something deeper. A small moment of connection had been established. At night, after the children had retired, Helen found Richard on the porch. "I'll help with the documentation tomorrow," she said simply. "What made you change your mind?" Helen sighed. "I haven't completely changed. I still think it was imprudent to bring him like this, but," she hesitated, "there's something special about him. And as a psychologist, I know that sometimes families form in unexpected ways." Richard smiled, taking his wife's hand. "So we're moving forward? Let's take one step at a time. First, temporarily regularize. Then evaluate how everyone adapts. I don't want him or Sophie to get hurt in this process." In the guest room, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. From the fire escape to a mansion in a gated community, from invisible to important, from nobody to somebody. His thoughts were interrupted by soft knocks on the door. It was Sophie. "I can't sleep," she whispered. "Want to play video games?" Gabriel had never played video games in his life, but Sophie's inviting smile was irresistible. As though he learned to handle the controller, Gabriel felt something unfamiliar growing inside him. It wasn't just gratitude or relief at having a roof and food, it was something deeper and scarier. Hope, the dangerous feeling that maybe this time would be different. That maybe this time he could stay. 1 week turned into 2, and 2 weeks soon became a month. Gabriel remained at the Morgans' house, and each day brought new challenges and discoveries. Helen had initiated the process of temporary guardianship, a temporary alternative, while they evaluated the next steps. Visits to Child Protective Services became frequent, always with Gabriel downcast, fearing that each visit might be the last. "They're not going to send me away today, are they?" he always asked on the way back. "No, Gabriel," Helen replied with a patience that surprised even herself. "We're just following the correct procedure." The boy's adaptation to the family routine occurred in a surprisingly natural way. His room, previously impersonal, gained personality. Books borrowed from Richard's library, a globe that Sophie had unearthed from the basement, and a small board where he practiced Chinese characters. At school, After placement tests, Gabriel was enrolled in the 4th grade, appropriate for his age. The teachers didn't take long to notice his above-average potential, especially with languages. "Your son has an extraordinary gift," commented the English teacher during the first parent-teacher conference. "He already masters concepts that we normally teach only in 7th grade." Richard and Helen exchanged glances without correcting the misunderstanding. It was the first time someone had referred to Gabriel as their son, and the word, although technically incorrect, didn't sound strange. At the company, Gabriel's occasional presence caused a stir. Employees who initially viewed him with distrust now vied for his attention. The boy had the gift of making everyone feel special, remembering personal details that many shared casually without expecting them to be registered. "How's your mother, Ms. Martha? Was the knee surgery successful?" he would ask with genuine interest. "Gabriel, you said you were going to teach me how to say good morning in Mandarin," the security guard at the reception would demand. Richard observed these interactions with a mix of pride and concern. The boy built bonds quickly, as if trying to compensate for a lifetime of lost connections. However, not everything was rosy. Carl Vance remained resistant to the boy's presence. "Richard, we need to talk about the boy," he said during a board meeting. "Journalist Monica Parker is asking uncomfortable questions. She insinuated that we might be using the boy as social marketing to improve our image after last year's layoffs. So that's absurd. Gabriel is not a marketing strategy. I know that. You know that. But public impression is another thing. I suggest we keep the boy out of the spotlight for now." Richard reluctantly agreed. The last thing he wanted was to expose Gabriel to more instability. At home, Sophie and Gabriel were becoming increasingly close. The teenager, previously lonely and somewhat rebellious, had found in her new friend not just a study companion, but a confidant. "Before you came, I hated this house," Sophie confessed one afternoon as they studied in the garden. "I thought everything was so boring and predictable. And now it's different. It's like you brought something that was missing." Gabriel smiled timidly. "Your mom still doesn't like me much." "That's not true. She's just cautious. It's part of her job. I heard her telling your dad that she doesn't want you to get too attached to me in case I have to leave." Sophie closed her book forcefully. "You're not leaving. I won't let you." The teenager's determination moved Gabriel. It was strange to have someone fighting for him when he had always had to fight alone. That night, during dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Monica Parker, the journalist Carl had mentioned. "I'm sorry to appear without warning," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm doing a report on corporate social initiatives, and I'd very much like to talk about young Gabriel." Helen quickly intervened. "This is our private residence, Ms. Parker. If you want an interview, you should schedule it with the company's press office." "I understand perfectly, but since I'm here, can I at least meet the famous linguistic prodigy?" Gabriel, who was discreetly observing from the corridor, stepped forward. "That's me, but I'm not a prodigy." Monica examined him with clinical interest. "So you're the boy who saved Morgan Textiles? Impressive. And how is it living with the Morgans? Better than the streets, I imagine?" The question, laden with insinuations, made Richard step forward. "That's enough. Please leave or I'll call the community security." After the journalist left, a heavy silence fell over the house. Gabriel stared at the floor, visibly disturbed. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have appeared." Helen surprised everyone by approaching and gently touching the boy's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, Gabriel. Some people simply don't understand that family isn't limited to blood ties." The words hung in the air, charged with meaning. It was the first time Helen had insinuated that Gabriel could be more than a temporary guest. That night, Richard was awakened by muffled screams. He ran to Gabriel's room and found the boy agitated, trapped in a nightmare. Helen was already there, trying to calm him. "Don't leave me, please," Gabriel murmured between sobs. "I promise to be good. I promise not to break anything." Helen held him firmly, rocking him as she did with Sophie when she was little. "It's all right, Gabriel. We're here. Nobody is going to leave you." Richard observed the scene, moved. Helen, always so rational and contained, was now cradling the boy with a visceral tenderness. When Gabriel finally calmed down and went back to sleep, Helen remained seated on the edge of the bed, stroking his hair. "What did he say while dreaming?" Richard asked softly. Helen wiped away a discreet tear. Fragments of memory, cold, hunger, people passing by him as if he were invisible, a man yelling at him to get out of a stairway, his mother promising to return and never coming back. He talked about his mother. Yes, he said she promised it was just for a few days, that she was sick and needed treatment. Richard felt a pang of anger at that unknown woman who had abandoned such a special child. "Do you think we should try to find her?" asked Helen, surprising him. "I thought you were against the idea of keeping him with us." "I was. Maybe I still am, in part. But he deserves answers, Richard. He deserves to know his story, even if it's painful." The next morning, Gabriel seemed not to remember the night episode. He was preparing toast for everyone with his usual enthusiasm, telling Sophie about a book he was reading. Richard took the opportunity to make an announcement. "Gabriel, would you like to accompany me on the trip to New York next week? We have an important meeting with new international partners." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I really go?" "Of course. After all, you are now our official international relations consultant." Gabriel's expression of happiness was heartbreaking, as if each kindness, each inclusion, each gesture of trust was an extraordinary gift he had never expected to receive. During the trip to New York, Richard observed how Gabriel behaved with impressive ease in meetings, transitioning between English, Mandarin, and other languages without apparent effort. The foreign executives were enchanted with the boy, treating him not as a curiosity but as an equal. "Where did he study?" asked one of the investors. "In the School of Life," Richard replied with pride. "Gabriel has a natural talent." During a break, Richard found the boy contemplating the view of the city from the top of the hotel. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is," replied Gabriel. 2 months ago I was sleeping under awnings, and now I'm on the 40th floor of a 5-star hotel. You deserve this and much more." Gabriel turned to face him. "Why?" "What do you mean, why? Why are you and your family doing all this for me? Just because I helped with the Chinese?" Richard sat down beside the boy. "No, Gabriel. It's not just because of that, it's because you showed us something important." "What?" "That sometimes the most precious value isn't where we expect to find it. That a family can be formed in many different ways. That we have space in our lives for more love than we imagined." Gabriel absorbed the words in silence. After a few moments he spoke in an almost inaudible voice. "I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of getting used to all this. Of believing it can last. Whenever I think I've found a place, something goes wrong, and I have to leave." Richard put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "This time is different, Gabriel. We're fighting for you to stay with us. Legally, permanently, if you want, of course. Like a son?" The word hung between them, charged with hope and apprehension. "Yes, Gabriel. Like a son." Silent tears ran down the boy's face, which he quickly wiped away. "I think I'd like that." Back home, they found Helen and Sophie preparing a small surprise party. There was a cake with "Welcome to the Family" written in colorful frosting. "Sophie insisted," explained Helen with a shy smile. "But I confess the idea pleased me." Gabriel was paralyzed before the scene, unable to process such a demonstration of affection. "You didn't like it?" asked Sophie, concerned about his silence. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me," he finally responded. During the small celebration, the phone rang. It was Carl Vance, and his voice sounded tense. "Richard, we have a problem. The journalist published an article insinuating that we're using the boy to clean up our image after the layoffs. She suggests that we might even be exploiting his talent. That's absurd. There's more. She got an interview with a social worker who questions the legality of the boy's situation and suggests that he should be in an official shelter until his situation is regularized." Richard's blood ran cold. "Can they take him from us?" "Technically, yes. The temporary guardianship hasn't been officially granted yet." After hanging up, Richard found 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him. "It's about me, isn't it?" asked Gabriel. The joy of minutes before completely dissipated. "They're going to take me away." "No, they won't," Helen replied with surprising firmness, "not without a fight." Her determination caught everyone by surprise. The same woman who weeks before questioned the prudence of taking in the boy now seemed ready to face the system. To keep him. "Tomorrow I'll contact my connections in child psychology," she continued. "We'll request an independent evaluation that proves that the best for Gabriel is to remain with us." Richard observed the transformation in his wife with admiration. The same maternal instinct that had always made her fiercely protect Sophie now extended to Gabriel. "And I'm going to give an interview to clarify everything," decided Richard. "No intermediaries, no distortions." That night, after the children had retired, Helen found a folded note under her door. Gabriel's childish handwriting formed carefully chosen words. "Dear Mrs. Helen, thank you for fighting for me. No one has ever done that before. If you need me to leave to protect your family, I understand. I just wanted you to know that these have been the best days of my life. With love, Gabriel." The simple words broke the last barriers in Helen's heart. Holding the note against her chest, she cried silently. For Gabriel, for all abandoned children, and for herself, for almost having refused the opportunity to know that extraordinary soul. The next morning, Richard and Helen sat with Gabriel and Sophie for a frank conversation. "You are our family now," said Richard, looking directly at Gabriel, "and families face problems together." "But I don't want to cause problems," protested the boy. "Maybe it's better if I go to a shelter for a while until things calm down." "Absolutely not," Helen replied firmly. "We made a promise to you and we're going to keep it." Sophie held Gabriel's hand. "Besides, who's going to help me with Mandarin if you leave?" The comment drew a timid smile from the boy. It was incredible how in such a short time he had become indispensable to all of them. "So what's the plan?" asked Gabriel, now more confident. Richard and Helen exchanged determined looks. The path would be difficult, but now they were all together on this journey. An unlikely family united by something stronger than blood ties, the conscious choice to belong to each other. "The plan," Richard replied, "is to show the world that sometimes the truest families are those we build from the heart." Gabriel nodded, absorbing every word. For the first time in his young life, he felt truly safe, not because he had a roof, food, or material comfort, but because he had people willing to fight for him, people who saw him not as a useful linguistic prodigy, not as a charity case, but simply as Gabriel, the boy who, against all odds, had finally found his place in the world. The days that followed were intense. The article published by Monica Parker generated exactly the effect that Carl Vance had feared. A wave of questions about Gabriel's situation. Child Protective Services intensified their visits, and a hearing was scheduled to determine the boy's fate. "I don't understand why they're doing this," Gabriel vented after another tense visit from social workers. "I was worse off on the streets and nobody cared." "That's exactly the problem," Helen explained gently. "When you were invisible, no one questioned. Now that you're in the spotlight, everyone wants to give their opinion on what's best for you." The date of the hearing was approaching, bringing with it the anxiety that hung over the house. Sophie became overprotective of Gabriel, accompanying him everywhere as if she feared he might disappear at any moment. The boy, in turn, became increasingly silent, as if trying to occupy as little space as possible. One afternoon, while working in his home office, Richard received an unexpected visit. A private investigator recommended by his lawyer. "Mr. Morgan, we found information about Gabriel's biological mother," announced the man, placing a folder on the desk. "Her name is Christina Adams. She currently lives in Rochester." Richard examined the report with a racing heart. According to the documents, Christina had abandoned Gabriel when he was 5 after severe late postpartum depression complicated by chemical dependency. There was no record of attempts to reconnect with her son. "Does she know we found Gabriel?" "Not yet. We await your instructions before making any approach." Helen, who had joined the conversation, expressed her concern. "What do you intend?" To do with this information, Richard, seeking the biological mother could bring more complications at the moment. Or it could be our solution, Richard replied thoughtfully. If she officially agrees to the adoption, our path becomes clearer. And if she wants her son back? Helen's question hung in the air, laden with fear. Both had become deeply attached to Gabriel, and the idea of losing him to someone who had abandoned him was unbearable. We have to take the risk, Richard finally decided. Gabriel deserves to know his complete story, regardless of the outcome. The decision to contact Christina Adams was kept secret from Gabriel and Sophie. Richard traveled to Rochester the next day, accompanied only by the investigator. The address led them to a simple but organized neighborhood. Christina worked as an attendant at a local pharmacy. When Richard identified himself, the woman's face went pale. "You found Gabriel? Is he well? Is he alive?" The genuine concern in her voice surprised Richard. "Yes, he's well, very well, actually." At a nearby cafe, Christina listened attentively as Richard narrated how Gabriel had entered their lives. Silent tears ran down her face. "I never wanted to abandon him," she confessed. "I was very sick. The depression, the drugs, I couldn't even take care of myself. I thought the shelter would be temporary until I recovered. When I finally managed to get treatment, he had already run away. I searched for years, but without resources, without support." Richard observed the woman before him. There were no signs of current addiction in her. She seemed tired, but balanced. "He speaks other languages now," Richard told her. "He's brilliant at school. He has a promising future ahead of him." Christina smiled through tears. He was always special. Even as a small child, he learned everything, with remarkable ease. "What do you intend to do now that you know where he is?" The direct question made Christina take a deep breath. "I want to see him. Explain what happened. Ask for forgiveness," she paused. "But I won't take him away from you. That wouldn't be fair to Gabriel." Richard felt immense relief. "Would you agree to an official adoption?" "If it's best for him, yes. But I'd like to maintain some contact, if possible, even if just so he knows he wasn't abandoned out of malice or lack of love." Upon returning home, Richard found Helen anxious for news. "She seems sincere," he reported. "She said she wants to meet him, but doesn't intend to interfere with our family." "Do you believe her?" "I do. And I think this meeting could be important. For Gabriel, he needs to know he wasn't simply discarded. It was decided that the meeting would happen at the Morgans' house, in a controlled environment and with Helen's presence, who could offer psychological support if necessary. First, however, they needed to prepare Gabriel. The conversation with the boy was delicate. Seated in the garden, his favorite place in the house, Richard and Helen explained that they had found his biological mother. "She wants to see me?" asked Gabriel, his voice trembling. "Yes, she looked for you for a long time. Why did she leave me?" The simple question carried years of pain. Helen chose her words carefully. "She was sick, Gabriel, a sickness of the mind and spirit that prevented her from properly caring for you. It wasn't for lack of love." Gabriel absorbed the information in silence. After long minutes, he asked, "Do you want me to go live with her?" "No," Richard and Helen responded in unison. "We want you to stay with us," continued Richard, "forever. But we think it's important for you to know your story, your origins. And if I don't want to see her? It's your choice, Gabriel. We won't do anything you don't want." The boy reflected for a moment. "I think I want to meet her. But I don't want to leave here." Helen hugged him. "This is your home now, Gabriel. Nothing will change that." The meeting was set for the following Sunday. Gabriel was visibly nervous, changing clothes 3 times before deciding on a blue shirt that Sophie had chosen for him. "What if she doesn't like me?" "Impossible," Sophie assured. "Everyone likes you." When the doorbell rang, everyone's heart accelerated. Christina entered timidly, carrying a small package. Her eyes immediately found Gabriel's, as if she could recognize him among thousands. "You've grown so much," she said with a choked voice. Gabriel remained motionless, studying the face of the woman he hadn't seen in 4 years. There were familiar features in it. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same chin shape. "Hi," was all he managed to say. The initial meeting was tense, with superficial conversations and uncomfortable silences. But gradually, as Christina told about Gabriel's early years, about how he had learned to speak extremely early, about his insatiable curiosity, the boy began to relax. "Do you remember this book?" asked Christina, handing him the small package she had brought. Gabriel carefully opened the wrapping, revealing a well-worn children's book. "The Little Prince." He read the title aloud. "It was your favorite. I read it to you every night. Even when you were too young to understand. You liked the drawing of the fox." Gabriel slowly leafed through the book, a distant memory emerging in his mind. "You used to do a different voice for each character." Christina's face lit up. "You remember?" That small moment of connection broke the last barrier. Gabriel allowed himself to ask questions about his childhood, about what had happened, about why she hadn't come back for him. Christina answered everything with painful honesty, without trying to justify herself or minimize her mistakes. "I failed you, Gabriel, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But I want you to know that never, not for 1 second, did I stop loving you." The words, simple and direct, hit Gabriel deeply. They didn't erase the years of abandonment and suffering, but they offered something he had never expected to receive, an explanation. Helen, observing attentively, noticed the exact moment when Gabriel began to process understanding and forgiveness. It wasn't unconditional or naive forgiveness. It was the mature recognition that people are complex, fallible, and sometimes victims of their own limitations. At the end of the visit, Christina looked at Richard and Helen with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of him, for giving him what I couldn't." "Can we stay in touch?" Gabriel asked timidly. "I would love that," Christina replied, "but only if your parents agree." The word parents, referring to Richard and Helen, naturally coming from Christina's lips, silently sealed an understanding among all the adults present. The following week, with Christina's documented consent, the adoption process advanced significantly. The hearing at the juvenile court, previously feared, transformed into a moment of celebration. The judge, impressed with the reports from social workers, Gabriel's exemplary adaptation to school and family, and the biological mother's consent, granted permanent guardianship to the Morgans, with the full adoption process underway. Monica Parker appeared at the exit of the court, apparently regretting her previous approach. "Mr. Morgan, I'd like to do a different story this time, about how companies can positively contribute to social issues." Richard smiled, without resentment. "I'll be happy to grant an interview, Ms. Parker, but not about charity or social responsibility. About family, about how sometimes we find treasures in the most unexpected places." The following months brought normality and stability. Gabriel Morgan, now officially with the family surname, continued to impress everyone with his talent for languages. Besides Mandarin, he now mastered English, Spanish, and was beginning to learn French. Morgan Textiles prospered, with new international contracts facilitated by the linguistic skills of the new family member. Richard, inspired by the transformation in his own life, created a scholarship program and work opportunities for young people in vulnerable situations. Helen, deeply touched by the experience, redirected part of her clinical practice to the care of children and adolescents in the process of late adoption. "Every child deserves a family that truly sees them," became her professional motto. Sophie, now 15, discovered through her coexistence with Gabriel a vocation for teaching. She began to give voluntary tutoring at the local community center, showing a patience and dedication that surprised everyone. On a sunny afternoon, as the family celebrated the one-year anniversary of Gabriel's arrival, Carl Vance appeared with an unusual gift. "It's the first edition of the company's internal newspaper," he explained, handing a printed magazine to Gabriel. "And you're our cover." The article, titled "The True Value," told the story of the boy who had transformed not just the fate of a company, but the understanding of value within the organization. "It seems I finally understood what Richard saw in you from day one," admitted Carl. "It wasn't just your talent, but your humanity." Gabriel, now more confident and expansive, smiled. Mr. Richard always says that the true value of a company is measured by the lives it transforms. And he's right, agreed Carl. He's never been more right. The party continued cheerfully with the discreet presence of Christina, who now maintained regular contact with Gabriel and had found a better job in the city, allowing more frequent visits. Richard observed his expanded family with a sense of fullness he had never imagined possible. His gaze crossed with Helen's, who smiled in silent complicity. Both had grown and transformed as much as Gabriel in that journey. Later, when the guests had already left, Gabriel found Richard contemplating the city from the terrace. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" The word Dad, now used naturally, still caused a wave of emotion in Richard. "I was thinking about how you changed our lives." Gabriel shook his head. "You changed mine. I would be nothing without you." "That's not true, Gabriel. You were always extraordinary. We just had the luck to discover that." The boy reflected for a moment. "You know what I like most here?" "What?" "That I can just be myself. I don't need to be the prodigy boy, the interpreter, the poor thing. I can just be Gabriel." Richard hugged his son, deeply touched by the simplicity and depth of those words. It wasn't the linguistic talent, nor the exceptional intelligence that made Gabriel special. It was his capacity to remain genuine, to preserve kindness even after years of abandonment, to believe he deserved to be loved simply for existing. 2 years later, the official picture of the Morgan family on the living room wall gained a new version. In it, Gabriel, now a confident teenager, appeared at the center, surrounded by Richard, Helen, and Sophie. Below the image, a small plaque with the words, "A person's value doesn't depend on where they came from, but on where they choose to go." Morgan Textiles had become a reference not only in quality textile products, but in humanized management practices. The program initiated by Richard had already benefited dozens of young people, many of whom pursued careers within the company itself. Gabriel, about to complete high school with distinction, had received invitations from national and international universities. His dream was to study international relations and linguistics, combining his natural talents with his desire to build bridges between different cultures. Christina, now recovered and stable, maintained an affectionate relationship with her son and his adoptive family. There were no resentments or competition, just the mature understanding that true love expands. It doesn't divide. On a special night during Gabriel's high school graduation, Richard went up on stage to deliver a special award created by the school, the Transformation Award, intended for the student who had contributed most to the school community. "When Gabriel knocked on my window that rainy night," Richard began, moved, "I thought I was receiving unexpected help for a business problem. What I didn't immediately realize was that I was receiving much more. A lesson about the true value of things. I learned that our value isn't in what we possess or achieve, but in the ability to see potential where others see only problems, to offer opportunities where others see only risks, to build families where others see only strangers." Gabriel received the award with tears in his eyes, embracing his adoptive father for a long time. In the audience, Helen and Sophie applauded standing, while Christina, discreetly in the back, smiled with pride and gratitude. Gabriel's journey had inspired many. His story, now known in the city, had motivated other families to consider late adoption. His example at school had encouraged cultural exchange programs and language learning. His presence in the company had transformed the organizational culture, making it more inclusive and humanized. But beyond all these visible achievements, there was the silent transformation in the hearts of those who loved him. Richard had learned to see beyond appearances and social conventions. Helen had discovered a capacity to love that she didn't imagine she possessed. Sophie had found a purpose and a compassion that would redefine her future. On a sunny afternoon, 5 years after that rainy night, Gabriel, now a young adult in his second year of university, was visiting the company he had once saved. Morgan Textiles proudly displayed at the entrance a plaque in various languages. The true value of a company is measured by the lives it transforms. Touching that plaque, as he always did when visiting, Gabriel recalled his extraordinary journey. From the cold streets to a loving home, from abandonment to belonging, from invisibility to recognition. In the president's office, now partially occupied by Gabriel during his vacation periods, Richard observed his son with undisguised pride. The young man who helped expand the company's international business was the same boy who had once climbed a fire escape in search of an opportunity. "You know, Dad," said Gabriel, using the word that now flowed naturally, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't had the courage to knock on that window." Richard smiled. "And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't had the courage to open it." That simple moment summarized the deepest lesson that everyone had learned. Sometimes destiny knocks on our window in the most unexpected form, and our only task is to have the courage to open it and allow it to enter. The story of the Morgan family wasn't perfect or free from challenges. Like every real family, they faced disagreements, went through difficult periods, made mistakes. But they had discovered together that the most precious value wasn't in perfection, but in the courage to start over each day, to choose each other repeatedly, to build bonds that transcended blood and circumstances. In the last scene of the family album, now full of memories of travels, graduations, and celebrations, one photograph stood out. Richard, Helen, Sophie, and Gabriel embraced in front of the window of the old office, the exact place where it all began. Below, a simple inscription that summarized their shared journey. Sometimes the family we build is even stronger than the one we are born into. And the value of a life is measured not by what we receive, but by what we have the courage to offer. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Gabriel and the Morgan family has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we've prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories. Find it here clicking to your left. If you like this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Don't miss our next